right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our weekly 30-minute webinar. My name is Matt Sykes, systems engineer here at Variphy. I'll be your host in today's webinar, and we're joined with Victor Verba, aka CDR Jesus. Before we go ahead and get started, I do want to point out that we now have a webinar suggestion box on our website, so you can certainly visit variphy.com and click on the webinar section and see the suggestion box here. So please feel free, if any related topics haven't been covered by us and you'd like to see them demonstrated, please drop us a suggestion in this box. Okay, without further ado, let me go ahead and present the slide deck here for us. Okay, for today's webinar, we're going to focus on how to create and run CUCM phone macros. We're going to start off with a quick overview of our company and what we do. We'll jump into a live demo where Victor will guide us through creation and use cases of UCM phone macros within Variphy. We'll pause for Q&A and get some of your questions answered. During the demo, if you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right corner of the screen. After the Q&A, we will reward one lucky attendee with a $50 Amazon gift card, so hang around to see if you may have won. A quick overview of Variphy. Variphy is the preferred analytics and management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR reporting and call analytics, customizable dashboards and widgets, UCCX reporting, remote phone control, change management. But today we're going to be focusing on the CUCM phone macros. If you have any other questions on any of our other related features, we can most certainly take them offline and get those answered. Before we get started, we would like to announce that Variphy does now offer a new service that provides managed consulting services to our customers. Variphy SE team will be engaged on a one-on-one basis to remotely provide additional consulting, unassisted reporting, dashboarding, configuration, and system monitoring resource assistance. That is a service that provides a dedicated Variphy SE to do all the heavy lifting of report creation, dashboard generations. So for any more further information on that, please contact us. We'd be glad to speak more in depth on our new service offering. All right, so I suppose let's get into the demo. Rick,
all right, buddy.
Let's go ahead and get us started. I'm going to pass you the ball.
All right. Excellent. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. As Matt had stated today, we're going to talk a little bit about how to go ahead and set up some macros within the Variphy application. Macros are a very powerful utility within Variphy, not only to be able to make changes on phones for things like screens, but also updating a lot of the internal network infrastructure. If you need to change TFTP addresses, update TFTP addresses, add alternates, or even turn on alternate TFTP. Those are all phone configurations and something that can all be done through macros. One of the most common things that we see with macros is obviously some of the ITL deletes or resets when search gets corrupt or are no longer matching the environment. So that's one of the more common things. We're going to talk a little bit about how Variphy does that. But for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm going to use two parts of the Variphy system here. One, I'm going to use the remote phone control so you can kind of see the changes that we're making, and I can walk you through the steps on how to create the macro, and I can show you exactly what we're doing on the screen. But then we're also going to run a macro, and we're going to monitor the phone control application so you can actually see the changes taking place. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and do for this demonstration is I'm going to bring up a phone over here. So we've got a phone out in our Denver location, and I'm using the remote phone control just to remote into the phone. Nice thing about remote phone control is all these buttons are live. Anything that I would need to do at a phone, I can actually do through remote phone control. But when you're talking about having to update 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 5,000 phones at once to either change wallpaper back to a company wallpaper or update the ITIL certs, or add a secondary TFTP. Nobody wants to remote control that many phones. So that's where macros come in. So what the purpose of a macro is to really kind of push out updates at scale. In other words, I have a large change that I need to make. I don't want to send out an email to 1,000 customers or end users and try to walk them through how to make these changes at their phone. I don't want to come in on a Saturday and have to make all these changes. And that's a little bit of where macros come in. So for the purpose of today's demonstration, we're going to walk through how to do a simple macro and just change wallpaper. Now, the concept of what we're going to do here is the same regardless of what macro you're creating. It's all just a series of button pushes. So what I've got up on my screen over here is my 8865 phone. So we're going to use that as a sample here, and I'm going to go over to my phone macros. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a macro. So pretend I don't have one over here. So I'm going to go ahead and just navigate over to Edit Macros, and I'm just going to click Add. That's going to bring us into the macro building screen here. Now, macros are basically just a series of button pushes that we execute in bulk, depending on a subset that you create or what phones you want to be able to push those out to. So first thing we're going to do is we're identifying our phone. Our phone's an 8865, so maybe I want to change all my 8865s. Maybe I just want to change them in a particular device pool. We're going to talk about subsets and how you execute those in subsets. But for this demonstration, we're going to use this phone here, and we're going to go ahead and change wallpaper. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through the steps on the screen over here, and then we're going to go create a macro around those steps. The reason I wanted to bring up the screen here is just to kind of show you visually what we're going to do and how that is represented in a macro. Nice thing about Cisco is regardless of what setting or configurations you're trying to go into, if I just Google Cisco 8865 phone buttons to adjust wallpaper on, it'll actually bring up the steps for you. So it's Google's a pretty nice utility, and Cisco's done a pretty good job of being able to put those steps out there. But for our demonstration, I kind of want to show you how it's going to work hand in hand. So the first thing here is we're on an 8865. So I'm going to want to change my phone to an 8865 or the 8800 series. Nice thing about most of these 8800 series is the configurations in the back end are the same. So I can pick my 8811 through 8865 right here. Now what's going to happen is Variphy recognizes that phone, and it's going to give you the keypad digits that are associated to that particular model of phone. So we're doing the work for you there by showing you what's associated to the phone. So let's kind of walk through it. So I'm on my screen, I'm on my display. The first thing I need to do is I'm going to go ahead and change the wallpaper. I need to get into the applications button over here. So I add the applications button, and then where's my wallpaper? It's in my settings. So keystroke is number 2. So I'm going to want to go do number 2. So let's kind of start from the beginning here. So applications, and first thing I'm going to do is at the beginning of my sequence, I want to go to the applications button. So pretty straightforward, easy enough to do. So I'm going to press the application button, and I'm going to add that to the beginning of my sequence. And you can always add a description here about what you're doing for each step of the way, and I'll show you some of those. I'm probably not going to do that for the purpose of this demonstration because it'll eat up all the time when I start putting all these descriptions in there. So now I've hit my applications button. The next thing I need to do is get into my settings button. That's number 2. So we're going to go ahead and add step number 2, and that's going to take me into keystroke number 2. So I'm just going to hit digit number 2 the same way I did on the phone, and that's going to bring me back into, let's take a look at it. It's going to bring me back to, here's my applications. Number 2 is bringing me into my settings, and number 3 here is going to bring me right into my wallpaper. So I hit number 1 on step 3, and that's going to bring me right into my wallpaper. So let's go ahead and add that, and we're going to put that after hitting digit number 2, and that's going to bring us into our wallpaper. So I'm going to refresh my screen here, and now you're going to be able to see the wallpaper. And that didn't load right away, and that's actually a good example, because one of the things we're going to go back and do is we're going to add some pauses in between all these steps. Different phones render at different speeds. There's network configurations involved, depends on what that phone is doing. So we're going to add some pauses in between all these steps, because what's happening when we're running this macro is it's actually executing those keystrokes. So as those screens are loading, you have to give it enough time for it to get the wallpaper up in order to be able to hit the next keystrokes to be able to navigate down to your wallpaper. So now that we're actually in the wallpaper screen, that was our step number 3 right here. The next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we need to navigate over to our wallpaper. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the down arrow, and I'm going to go ahead and change this over to a mountain scene here. So I got down arrow, and then I'm going to go right 2. And that's going to take me right over to this wallpaper screen that I want to do. So for that, I need to execute that into a macro as well. So now that I'm in my wallpaper here, so in wallpaper. So the next thing I'm going to do is navigate down my keystrokes or my up and down arrows. So I'm going to go down 1, and in my case, I'm going to go right 2. And we'll add, where did it go? Press right navigation arrow. There we go. All right, so now what we've done is we've gotten into applications, we went into our settings, we went into our wallpaper, we've navigated down 1 and then over right 2. So that's going to bring us down 1 and over right 2 and bring us into this nice little mountain scene it looks like over here. All right, so now let's say we set that. In order to set that, we have to be able to go ahead and use our keys. So let's go ahead and set our wallpaper here as our next step. And for that, we're going to go ahead and use our soft key number 2, because that is the set option. And I'm just going to kind of walk through it. So now I used wallpaper number 2, and it's going to come up with some additional menus. Let me refresh this guy. And it brings me right back. So now my wallpaper is set, but I still want to exit out of here. So I don't want people coming back into the office and seeing, this on their screen. It's going to confuse people. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit soft key number 1 and add that guy down there. And let's take a look at our remote phone control. So when I hit soft key number 1, it's going to go ahead and bring me back into the settings key. So again, I need to hit another soft key here. And when I do that on my screen, you're going to see that it brings me back to the screen. And now I've got a nice new wallpaper on the screen. So let's go ahead and walk through the step and show you how to run this macro, show you how to create a subset so it'll run on just this phone or the device pool or all the 8865s in my environment. So I'm going to go ahead and set this guy back to just a different wallpaper here real fast. So we can kind of see this guy in action here. And let's see with this guy, you can see he's still rendering. It hasn't brought up all of the different screens that are available, which is, again, why we're going to add some pauses in here. And I don't know, we're just going to go ahead and use, we'll set this guy up on there. Make sure that he took. And there we go. So now we've got a different wallpaper on there. So like I said, we definitely want to add some pauses. Now I could have easily added this, then added a pause, then added this, and then added a pause. I find it easier to just go through and add the pauses all at the end and then just move them up and down. So you'll notice down towards the bottom, you have wait for 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. 5 seconds, you're usually pretty safe. After these general keystrokes, you can see how fast the screen loads. So even 1 second is really enough to be able to get to these other screens. I just like 5 seconds. I think it's just a safe bet. So now where do I want to execute this pause? Let's see. I can go ahead and execute it after the applications button. And there we go. So now I've got a pause in there. Next one I want to do is after the second keystroke, I'm going to add another pause. All right, so now I'm in my applications button, I'm in my settings button, and here's my wallpaper. So after the wallpaper, before I start navigating down, you notice it took a little bit more time to render. Depending on how many different wallpapers you have up on your call manager server that it's pulling from, it could take a little while. So after the wallpaper, I'm going to go ahead and add, instead of a 5 second delay, I'm just going to add a 10 second delay. And where we want to add that, we're going to add that right after digit 3. Digit 3 is what brings us into our wallpaper. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and use our navigation arrows. And for each one of these, I'm just going to add a quick 5 second. And again, like I said, these are just basic up-down strokes. So you can really get away with 1 second. But again, like I said, for the purpose of this, we're going to go ahead and add that. So we're going down. We're going to pause for 5 seconds. And we're going to do the same thing here. And then the same thing here. All right, so now what we've got is, 1, we're getting into applications. We're going to wait 5 seconds. 2, we're getting into the system settings. We're going to wait 5 seconds. Key port number 3 is taking us into the wallpaper, where we're going to wait 10 seconds for that screen to render. Then we're going to hit the down arrow. We're going to wait 5 seconds. We're going to hit the right arrow, 5 second, right arrow, and then we're going to go ahead and pause. And we hit our soft key here, sorry, right navigation. Actually, you know what? I missed a pause here. So let me go ahead and add another pause in here. There we go. So there we're going to go right arrow pause, soft key to exit, pause, soft key to exit, pause, and that's it. We've basically created a macro that's going to change all of the screens over to our mountain dashboard for all of our 8865s if we choose. We'll say, we're going to give this macro name. We're going to say change to mountain view. If I could spell mountain right. And then we can give it a description in here if we wanted to add any kind of description. And then we can, again, change the description to all of these guys. So let's give this guy a save. So now we've got our macro. Let's take a look down here. I think it called it change to mountain view. You know what? There we go. And we can see this is listing out all of the steps that it's going to go ahead and take. And then here's where those descriptions become pertinent. You can see we've got some other canned macros in here where it's basically, the descriptions are really just telling you what that particular button press is doing. All right. So now we've got our macro. We need to be able to go ahead and figure out how we're going to run it against some phones. So for that, we're gonna pop back over to macros. Let me get into the right cluster here. And you're going to see we have the option to run our macro, but we need to be able to run it against a certain thing, certain number of phones or different types of phones or different models of phones or device pool, or maybe even one particular phone. So in order to do that, we need to be able to go ahead and, let's see, change to Mountain View. Where did my macro just go? There it is. But in order to do that, we need to be able to set what we want to run it to. We don't want to run it across the whole organization because the boss doesn't want to come in to see a Mountain View. He wants to see his family. So in order to do that, we have to create what's called subsets. And right here, you can see we've got a couple subsets created, but we're going to go ahead and create one for our phone. Now, if I go back to phone control, let's take a look at our phone, actually. So there we've got our 8865. We can see that it's actually in the Denver device pool. But let's go, maybe we don't want to change all the Denver 8865s, or maybe we do. Nice thing about macros is when we're creating a subset, it's actually going to come out and tell us the number of phones and what phones are included in that particular subset. So let's get started. So I'm popping in over to subsets, and we've got a couple of canned ones, but we're going to go ahead and add a new one. And this is where you're really defining the criteria of what you're going to go ahead and change. So I know it was in Denver, so I want to be able to hit my Denver queue or my Denver device pools. All right. I didn't know what location. I didn't bother to look what location, so I'm just going to go ahead and run this against all locations. The next thing I can do is, one, I can go ahead and specify an individual phone. And if I do this, I'm going to go ahead and run this against all the 8865s in my particular office. All right. And let's go ahead and let's give this guy a quick save. We'll just call it Denver 8865s. All right. So now when I save this guy, what you're going to notice here is I have my subset for Denver 8865s, and I can see I've got one device pool filter and one model filter in here. And if I look at my controllable phones, it's actually going to bring up all the phones that fit the bill for this particular search criteria that we have in here. In my case, I only have one. So just to give you another example, let me go back into my macro here. And let's say we wanted to run this for all phones. If I check any and save, now it's running for just my Denver device pool. That's all that I have selected here. If I look at the controllable phones, we're probably going to see a lot more because now I'm saying this is not just for 18865, this is for all phones. You know, obviously when you're talking about a macro, those button pushes that you're using are specific to those phone models. So you do have to be somewhat specific when you're running this because you don't want to run a certain keystroke against a 7700 that is not going to make any sense and really just not do anything for you or have the user come in with a broken phone. So let's go ahead and edit our macro. We're going to go back and add the 8865s. Looks like I only have one phone in there. So let me go ahead and uncheck that. We're going to go ahead and add our 8865 back in here. And we're going to give this guy a save. So now we're running it against all Denver, just an 8865 phone, or I could come in here and put in a MAC address of a specific phone. So the nice thing about this is these are kind of and statements. So these are compounding. So what I am saying is this device pool for this particular model phone. And if I add a MAC address of a phone in here, just to kind of give you an example, what it's going to do, and look at my controlled results here, you can see I have 3 filters now, but I've also got no phones in here. So why? Because that MAC address that I add in here is not an 8865 or it's not in the Denver device pool. So the nice thing about that, by adding those individual MAC addresses, they do kind of compound each other and create and statements where it has to meet all of that criteria. So let me pop this guy out of here. Give this guy a save. And now we can see we're back to just our 2, and our controllable phone will be just the one controllable phone. There we go. So now let's go ahead and pop back over to our macros and give this guy a run. So this is one of the reasons that I definitely wanted to bring up phone control. I'm going to set this guy to just auto refresh every 5 seconds. And we're going to go ahead and just give this macro a run and watch him change some screens for us. Let me pop over to my macros, and this is where the subset comes in. So the first thing I want to do is, what macro do I want to execute? So where's my change mountain view? There we go. And I probably could have called this change mountain view for 8865 series or something like that. But you'll notice now we have our subsets. And we created the Denver 8865s. So there we go. Now that's just going to pick on that one particular phone. Here we could set how many phones it's going to go ahead and affect at once. You can go from 1 to 100. So that means that if I'm running this against 5,000 phones in my Denver device pool, it's going to do 10 at a time, or I can do 100 at a time, and it's going to roll those out individually. All right. The next thing you're going to see down here is this guy right here. HTTP will be used by default when this option is disabled. So what that means is by default, our system's going to go ahead and try HTTPS and HTTP in order to talk to these phones and execute those commands. That's the way the system works by default. Now, let's say you've got a phone out there, it's plugged in, it's got an IP address, but it's not registered. Maybe it's an ITIL delete problem and you need to clear out the certs, or maybe you just need to reset that phone. Without HTTP or HTTPS access, we can't access that phone. Remote phone control is not going to go ahead and work for you. But by check marking this guy, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the CTI manager on your call manager to execute those commands against that phone rather than using HTTP or HTTPS. This is most commonly used when you're trying to delete a cert that's corrupt and you're not able to speak with that or talk to that phone via standard methods. The phone is still on your call manager. It still has an IP address. It's just not registered. That's really where this Use CTI button comes in, because that's going to allow you to negate the HTTP or the HTTPS and actually use your CTI manager to execute the commands against the phone. In this case, I don't have a corrupt phone, so I'm not even going to bother using that. Next option here is skip any phones on a call. I'm just changing some background images. It's not going to interrupt with anybody's call, so not a big deal, but it is a good rule of thumb to be able to go ahead and just kind of turn that on, because depending on the button presses that you're utilizing, you may not want to interrupt somebody's call. Next thing we're going to go ahead and do is check mark these guys, and I'll show you what they do. They're basically going to capture a screenshot of that phone now, and then after the image is done or after the macro has executed, it's going to go ahead and send another picture of the image, and we can report those in the historical. All right, so the next thing it's going to do is, let's say I am running this against 5,000 phones, and for some reason, some of them aren't working. So what I can do is here I could say, 8865 wallpaper did not work. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a subset of all the phones that it could not execute the macro on. So that way I can go ahead and troubleshoot them. Maybe I had the wrong phones in there or phone model or something like that. And you could also choose to email those results to yourself, or you can go ahead and take a look at the macro history. So now that we've got that all set up, we've got our macro, we've got our subset here, which is just our Denver device 8865s. We're going to go ahead and capture all the general information. Let's go ahead and give that guy a quick execute. So now we can see, ignore that error message on my screen there. This guy's going to be updating. We can see it's running the macro. I can see the progress of the macro in the background here. It's going into my settings. Now it's going into my wallpaper. This is always the big one because it depends on how long that wallpaper takes to be able to execute. And it looks like maybe I screwed up a button push here because now I'm in the brightness of my actual phone. So let's see what it's actually going to go ahead and do here.
Yeah, step 3, I think that was, Vic.
Did I get step 3 here? Did I press the wrong button?
Step 3 should be digit 1.
Whoops. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let this guy finish up, and then we'll go ahead and change that. Thank you, Matt. Other nice thing you can see while we're looking at phone control here is I could actually execute that macro directly against this phone as well. So we came back, we said the macro was successful, but we're taking a look at our screens here. We could see before the macro ran, I had this particular message here, host not found. You saw that when I first popped into my screen. And then after the macro ran, you can still see what's going on, and I've got that brightness on the screen. So obviously that macro did not complete successfully. So let's go ahead and cancel out of here because we don't necessarily need to be here. And I'm going to turn off auto refresh because I don't need it to do that. And let's just go quickly edit our macro and just give them a quick rerun here. So if I'm in my macros, let's edit my macro. And here we go. So I've got my applications button here. I'm going into digit 2. Oh, I did digit 3 there. What was I thinking? Let's take a look here.
You were thinking step 3.
I think you're right. So let's go ahead and change this guy. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to press digit 1 on the keypad. And let's take a look. I'm going applications, number 1, number 2, And then I needed to do number 1 instead of number 3. All right, there we go. And we're going to put that guy right after this one. So now I've got my applications. There I'm going to go into my settings, and now I'm going to go into my wallpaper. Thank you, Matt. And I'm going to wait 10 seconds, so let's go ahead and give this guy a quick test here. And this is why we do these live.
You can definitely tell it's live.
So instead of running it through that, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and give it a shot. We're going to execute it directly through the macros utility, so you guys have the idea. Actually, what we can do is we've got it already queued up over here. View Denver, there it is. Subset, execute, and let's see if it does what I expect it to do now. And there it's taking us into our settings. Let's auto refresh this guy. Now hopefully we'll get into our wallpaper this round. And there we go. So we're getting into our wallpaper. It's still rendering. That's one of the reasons I do put that 10-second wait time on there, especially when we're trying to do wallpaper or any screen that can take a little bit of time rendering. Now it's doing the key presses and it's moving over. We can see it's on that wallpaper, moved over to the next wallpaper. And last but not least, we'll be on this guy. Oop, it looks like it already chosen our screen refresh. So then we're hitting our soft keys to exit. And it did not seem to take, or did it? Let's see if it took. Well, it did not seem to take. So my bad. So I must have missed another step here somewhere. Or one of the things is you know what? It may very well be that my screen didn't render, so I need to go ahead and add some additional pauses in here. But I hope everybody gets the idea of the macros. It's really just a series of button pushes and making sure that you've got those button pushes right. It's great to be able to execute these against a phone or two, kind of like we're doing now, just to make sure that we have the right steps in there, we have the right pauses in there, and I probably needed to add an additional pause in there or a longer pause to allow the screen to be able to render. And I imagine this host not found error is probably not helping me out at all either. So I have a feeling that could very well be what's causing part of the problem. But again, I want to thank everybody for their time today. Just a quick walkthrough on how to create a macro. Again, it's just a series of button pushes, then creating that subset on what you want to be able to push it out to. So Matt, back to you, and thank you all for attending today.
Awesome. All right, awesome job, Victor. Thank you as always. All right, I'm going to leave you as the presenter here. We're going to move into the Q&A section. So if anyone has any questions or concerns, please present them to the Q&A panel as of now. We do have a couple questions here for you, Victor. I can serve up to you. Luis asks, can you log someone off a phone using this?
You can, absolutely. You can definitely create macros to log somebody off a phone. It's somewhat of a common thing that we have, especially with hunt groups. A lot of folks have people that have to log into hunt groups. You can either use a macro and build a macro and just run it against a phone, or you can actually log into the phone by a remote phone control and log somebody off of a phone. So it's nice with a lot of people roll it out to managers to be able to say, you know, nobody wants to drag their butts into the office on a Saturday because somebody forgot to log off a hunt group and phones are still ringing. So yeah, you can definitely utilize it for that.
Very good, thank you. And Christine asks, can you reset a phone to factory default settings?
That's a tricky question. You can definitely reset phones, but it does depend on the model of phones. A lot of times a factory reset also requires unplugging that phone. But that does depend on the model, so you'd probably have to research your model and find out that if a factory reset does require unplugging that phone. If it doesn't, then you can absolutely use macros because you know, other things like being able to do key presses when you have to enter codes. A lot of times, if you're doing a factory reset, you might have to enter a security pin. That could also be entered through through a macro as well.
Gotcha. Very well. Awesome. Thank you, Victor. I believe that concludes our Q&A section here. Let's go ahead and reshare my screen before I forget to do that. All right, so the moment we've all been waiting for, the winner is Hector Rojas. Woo! Congratulations, Hector. You are this week's weekly winner of the $50 Amazon gift card. We will get your verified account manager in contact with you and get you paid. So thank you, everyone, for attending. I do want to mention that to register for next week's upcoming webinar, which will be on building security profiles with Victor and Dan. They're going to show you that, I believe, probably through some public search sets and nice restrictions that we have in place that we will showcase. So I will close with just saying thank you all for attending, and please also don't forget to visit the Variphy.com webinars page to put any suggestions you may have in the bucket for us for future webinar topics. Other than that, everyone enjoy your week and be good to one another. Thank you.